85, 86, 87. Jasmine counted the stomach crunches she performed on the floor of her room. When she reached her intended number of 100, she rolled over and switched to push-ups. Before she could complete her planned repetitions, someone knocked at the door. She sprang up and reached for the knob. Aris stood in the hall, his tremendous frame filling the doorway. His striking garb from the previous day had been replaced by a loose-fitting shirt with laces up the front and leather pants. "Good morning," she said in between loud breaths. "Good morning, Captain Hale." His pleasant expression shifted into one of concern. "Do you need to see a healer?" "What? No." She brushed some sweaty strands of hair away from her forehead. "I'm trying to do as much of my morning workout as I can here." "I see that." With one finger, he gently traced the strap of her tank top, beneath which a large purple contusion had formed. "I am referring to your injuries, which I assume you sustained in the crash." She shrugged. "Bruises heal. I'll be fine." He withdrew his hand. "Do let me know if you change your mind." "Yep." "I came to invite you to breakfast. I thought you might want something to eat before examining the items I retrieved for you." He looked her over from head to toe. "Though if you would rather finish what you were doing, I can wait." Jasmine wiped her brow with her forearm. "Yeah, I should probably wash up before joining you." The mention of food reminded her she hadn't eaten since earlier the previous day, and hunger gnawed at her stomach. "And breakfast sounds like a great idea." "Excellent." A smile spread across his face. "I am sure you located the shower and other facilities on your own. There should also be several sets of clean clothing for you." He rubbed the back of his head. "Though I am not sure if they will fit you properly." "Whatever's there will suffice." Another trickle of sweat dripped down her neck and chest to the edge of her shirt. "Give me a few minutes to make myself presentable, and I'll come join you." "There is nothing wrong with the way you present yourself now, Captain Hale, but do what makes you feel comfortable." He pulled the door shut behind him. Jasmine peeled off her dampened clothes and entered the bathroom. She fiddled with the unfamiliar faucets until the stream of water in the shower reached an acceptable temperature. Standing beneath the spigot, she finger-combed the tangles out of her hair. Once she was clean, she arranged the wet strands back on top of her head in her usual tidy bun. "Guess a brush and some extra elastics are too much to hope for around here," she muttered to herself as she wrapped a towel around her body. Stacks of clothing sat folded on shelves inside the wardrobe. She pulled something from the top of a pile and shook it out. It appeared to be a simple sleeveless dress made from beige, cotton-like material. When she wiggled into it, she realized the garment had been designed for someone much taller and slimmer than her. Annoyed by how the narrow sheath restricted her movements, she took it off and flung it to the side. The rest of the clothes suffered from the same issues. The idea of slipping back into her own sweaty clothes didn't appeal to her, so she surveyed the mess in front of her in search of a solution. She returned to the first dress and laid it flat on the floor. The thin fabric tore easily, and she removed a foot of length from the bottom. For extra ease, she unraveled the seam to create a short slit on one side. Though not thrilled with the way the dress still pulled over her shoulders, chest, and hips, she could walk without tripping. She opened the door and found another man waiting in the hallway. He bowed his head in greeting and indicated for her to follow him. Her bare feet made no noise on the smooth floorboards as she trailed behind her escort. They walked through the sunlit corridors to a modest dining room, where Aris sat at a square table. He rose when she approached, and his gaze traveled up and down her body for the second time that morning. If he disapproved of her alterations to the clothing he'd provided, he didn't voice his opinion. "I hope you found your accommodations adequate," he said, nodding to the seat opposite his. "I slept well. Better than I expected, actually." Jasmine climbed into the elevated chair with as much grace as possible, glad she didn't have to deal with the extra fabric binding her legs. A thick slice of bread and a round purple fruit were arranged on the plate in front of her. "This isn't going to kill me, is it?" She poked at the fruit. He scratched his chin. "To my recollection, none of our previous visitors from your world experienced any issues with our food." She bit into it and was pleased by its sweetness. "You know, that reminds me." She chewed on the juicy flesh as she mulled over the mystery plaguing her. "I won't claim to know everything there is to know about every planet in the galaxy, but I don't remember hearing even a brief mention of Rick before." 3 more bites and nothing remained but the pit. "I don't think I've seen it on any maps, either." Iris stared at her, his expression neutral. "I do not wish to give you any misinformation, Captain Hale. It is best you find your answers in your predecessor's words." Jasmine ate half the buttery bread before curiosity got the better of her. "I can finish this later. I'd really like to see what you have to show me now, if you don't mind." "I understand." He stood, and she followed. "Come with me." Tall windows filled one wall of the library he led her to, stretching from the floor to the ceiling. They allowed natural light to flood the space and offered a stunning view of the valley below. Aris stood at a heavy wooden desk in the center of the room and beckoned to her. "These are the items I retrieved from storage," he said, indicating what lay atop the desk with a sweep of his hand. "I am not sure if the electronic devices still work, though you are welcome to inspect them. But this—" He leaned over and nudged a leather-bound book toward her. "I thought this might be of particular interest to you." She gingerly lifted the cover with one finger, aware of its age and fragility. "Research Notes, Dr. John Coates," was written on the first page in small, neat letters. She peeked at the following page. Though time had faded the ink, she had no trouble reading the words. "This has been very well preserved, but I can't remember the last time I saw handwritten notes for anything." His partners did record their observations with more advanced tools, that is true. His lips curved into a wistful smile. "But I recall his comment about doing things the old-fashioned way. He said he enjoyed the tactile experience of the pen in his fingers and how it felt moving across the paper." She wrinkled her nose. "I always thought writing by hand took too long. I guess it's lucky for me, though." "Indeed." Iris straightened and stepped back. "I will leave you to your reading. Take as much time as you need." "Thank you." Jasmine picked up the journal and carried it to one of the large plush chairs near the windows. Setting it on the armrest, she curled up in the roomy seat and began to read. What an extraordinary place we have found ourselves in. When our team first set out to explore this group of planetoids in the Archel system, we were prepared for the possibility one or more of them would be inhabited. Coming across a previously undocumented species, let alone a whole civilization, is the kind of discovery most scientists can only dream of. Though the natives do not use the same technology we do, and we have seen no evidence they have attempted travel beyond their home, I would not label them as primitive or unintelligent. Quite the contrary, in fact. It has been one day since our first contact, and some of their ambassadors have already made headway in acquiring our language. I anticipate doing the same for them and eliminating the communication barriers in order to learn all we can while we're here. She turned the pages, reading Dr. Coates's notes on Rickian culture and traditions. Although she found his observations riveting, one question kept whispering in the back of her mind. Why haven't I heard about any of this before? Toward the back of the journal, she uncovered the answer. Her pulse raced, and her hands trembled so much she leaned away from the book in fear of causing damage. Swallowing back her dread, she reread the haunting words over and over. It is with great shame I must report the grievous error my colleagues and I have made. In our eagerness to immerse ourselves in the Rickian way of life and uncover the hidden treasures of this world, we neglected to pay attention to the skies from which we descended. The irregular orbit of this planet has taken us much farther away from our homes and at a much greater rate of speed than we ever predicted. Once our ship left Rick's atmosphere, Dr. Lewis calculated the amount of fuel necessary to return to the edge of the Archel system was considerably greater than what we had on board. We faced a difficult choice. Attempt to fly in the direction that would lead us home and hope to find another ship to signal for help, or return to Rick as it continued on its unyielding path. None of us wanted to risk running out of fuel and losing power to our life-supporting systems. As such, we decided to return to the people who had welcomed us. Since we know what to look for now, Dr. Pierce theorizes Rick is only visible and accessible to those on our side of the galaxy for a brief window. As we measure months and years differently from the Rickians, it's hard to pinpoint exactly how long it takes their planet to complete one trip around their sun. Unfortunately, based on his observations, Dr. Pierce believes that amount of time to be far longer than our natural lifespans. It was pure chance we were able to land here at all, and now I fear we may never leave. Jasmine fought the urge to throw the book across the room and forget everything she'd read. Before she could slam the journal shut, something caught her eye. She leaned forward and examined the center crease, running her fingers over the binding. Someone had removed several pages. She picked up the journal and wandered through the palace until she located Aris studying a map on a table in an office. Why? Her throat tightened, making the words difficult to get out. Why didn't you tell me I could be stuck here? He glanced up. You had already endured enough for one day, Captain Hale. I did not want to add to your burdens. Compassion softened his deep-set eyes. I am sure your people are searching the skies for you, even as we speak. Do you not trust them to thoroughly investigate your whereabouts? The mention of the crew she'd been forced to abandon made her wince. "How much time do I have?" she asked quietly. "I cannot answer." He drummed his fingers on the edge of the map. "As I have never seen my world from the outside, I am afraid that sort of knowledge is beyond my understanding." Jasmine let out a long, slow breath. The weight of the journal in her hand reminded her of her final discovery. "There are pages missing at the end." She opened the book and held it out for him. "What else are you hiding from me?" He didn't flinch at her accusation. "I am not withholding any other information from you, Captain Hale. You have my word." She walked forward and dropped the journal on the table. "Something else was in there. What is it you don't want me to see?" "It is not that I wish to keep things from you." Aris sighed and rubbed the side of his head. "I worried you might find the last entry upsetting." "I think I can decide for myself what I can handle," she snapped. Folding her arms across her chest, she glared at him. "Show me." He nodded. "If you return to the library, the last pages are in the top drawer of the desk." She hurried back down the hallway. The neat pile of papers lay where Aris had said they'd be, and she pulled them out of the drawer. With shaking hands, she spread the pages out on top of the desk and leaned over to finish reading the dismal tale. "In the grand scheme of things, I suppose we could have suffered a worse outcome. The Rickians are generous and have accepted our presence, and the planet's resources can sustain us. We are alive, and I see no reason why we wouldn't be able to live out the rest of our natural lifespans here. Despite our good fortune in some areas, our mistakes haunt me night after night. I don't know if I've truly conceded I'll never see my home again. Though I can take some comfort in acknowledging how I have survived. What of my beloved Charlotte?" We knew the assignment had its risks, as all exploratory missions of this nature do. Yet every time she kissed me goodbye, I always believed I would come back to her. This time was no different, and although I have my life and health, it is a hollow victory. The possibility of an existence without her never crossed my mind, but here I am, stranded millions of miles away. This journey that once brought me such joy has delivered a cruel blow to the woman I couldn't ever imagine harming. By now, I assume our team and our ship have been classified as missing, our whereabouts unknown. But what good do those labels do? Knowing Charlotte will never gain any closure as to what happened to me is unbearable. Does she lie awake so many nights like I do, praying the following day will be the one when she finally hears my voice? Or has she already given up hope? Has she allowed herself to grieve for me? Or will she keep believing she'll see me again until her last conscious moments? As much as I have learned and discovered here on Rick, I would give anything to somehow get a message to my wife. I often contemplate what I would say to her if I had the opportunity. I used to think I'd tell her how much I love her, but instead, I would try to take on the full burden of all this pain I have caused. I would tell her to move on, to let me go, for I am lost to an unknown world with no chance of... Jasmine let out the scream she'd been holding back and swept the pages to the floor with her arm. Pitching forward, she collapsed on the desk and buried her face in her elbow. Tears spilled forth as despair finally overtook her. Lieutenant Moore was dead, his remains forever enmeshed with the wrecked pod he'd worked so hard to save. The whereabouts of Commander Garrison and the rest of her crew were unknown. The ship she'd believed to be indestructible had exploded as she watched, helpless. Reading the anguished writings of Dr. Coates and learning of her potential fate proved too much to bear. Her loud sobs echoed in the room as she mourned all she'd lost. A heavy arm draped across her back, and someone stroked her shoulder. She slid off the desk toward Aris and allowed him to scoop her into a sturdy embrace. Balling her fists in his shirt, she wept against him, crying for her crew, her ship, and her doomed career. His skin felt smooth and warm beneath her cheek, and his body was solid and firm as he held her tight. Her grip loosened, her fingertips grazing the uncovered expanse of his chest. She let them linger, desperate not to feel alone and abandoned in the universe. He stiffened at her touch. The slight movement was enough to make Jasmine regain her composure. She wrenched away from him, wiping her face with the backs of her hands. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Her spine straightened and her chin lifted, yet she avoided making eye contact. If you'll excuse me, I'd prefer some time to myself right now. Before he could answer, she turned and fled toward her room. Jasmine sat on her bed, curled up against the wall with her knees pressed to her chest. Outside her window, 3 nearby planetoids shone brightly against a backdrop of infinite pinpoints of light. The glowing orbs taunted her, as they appeared so close, yet were impossible to reach. She stared at the night sky, wondering if she'd ever sail through the stars again. Someone knocked at the door. Yes, she called. Aris peeked inside, only the angled contours of his head visible. I did not wish to disturb you, but I worried about the way you left earlier. Well, I'm not planning on staying in here forever. Of course not. He lingered in the doorway. I have something for you, but if you wish to wait. She scooted to the edge of the bed and let her legs dangle off the side. It's fine, you can come in. He entered, holding out the items he'd brought. I believe these belong to you. The metallic surface of her helmet glinted in the moonlight. She took it from him and set it on the floor before reaching toward the second object. You trust me with my gun? I have seen nothing to make me think you intend to harm my people, Captain Hale. Aris passed the weapon to her. It is yours. She let out a long sigh and tucked one foot beneath her. I'm not a captain anymore. You can call me Jasmine. His brow creased. I do not see why you have been stripped of your title, but if it is what you want, I will do as you ask. He sat next to her on the bed, the frame creaking with his weight. As I make no claim of any authority over you, likewise, you may call me Aris if you desire. She shook her head. That's not fair. I'm in your world. I plan on following your rules. A hint of a smile appeared on his lips. Then consider it a courtesy I'm extending to a special guest. If you insist. Jasmine swiveled to face him, her thigh brushing against his. You know, I've been thinking a lot about what's happened to me and everything I read today. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. While I won't lie and say I'm thrilled about my circumstances, Dr. Coates was right. Things could have turned out a lot worse for them, and for me. Your attitude is admirable. And I don't want to sit and sulk by myself, or wait around to be rescued like some princess in a dumb fairy tale. That's no way to live. She leaned forward and stared up at him. Show me your world, Aris. Teach me your language, your customs, your beliefs. Let me be part of your life here. A brief flicker of confusion flashed through his eyes before his faint smile blossomed into a full grin. I look forward to doing so. Tilting her head to the side, she nibbled her lower lip. I have one more question. She fidgeted with the hem of her ill-fitting dress. The team of researchers, once they realized what had happened and they'd be here forever, eventually, were they happy here? For the most part, I think so. He stroked his chin. They lived in the city and carried on with their lives the same as anyone else. No one treated them any differently, and they acclimated themselves in time. Tension eased out of her shoulders, and she stopped toying with the fabric. That's good to hear. Actually, one of them even began living with a Rickian woman as husband and wife. If anyone had an objection, they never vocalized it. He frowned. Her soul returned to the mountains only a season ago. I wish you could have met her. Me too. She sat up straight and hoped if she spoke her words with confidence, she would believe them. If they found a way to thrive on this planet, then I can do the same. Aris patted the top of her hand. Nothing would give me greater pleasure.